Okay, so here we are, and Nock just asked this really interesting question. Can you ask it again, or frame it however you like, Nock, please?
Mm, I think that we talk a lot about future being open and many possibilities, but is it really that as open as we thought it would be? And is it really possible to emancipate from the past? Or how much emancipation can we get? Or what do we have to do? Or how deep do we have to go under in order to reach that point?
Very interesting question. Before I say anything, I think, Lilia, what would you like to offer a thought, and then Caitlin, and then we'll go around like that.
Yeah, I really like your open question, Nock, and it struck me when you asked that because I think that uh, yes, futures is one of the tools that can be used for emancipation because it allows creativity and critical thinking. Uh, and I am lucky to have had in the last few years possibility to be in groups in which both of these things, creativity and critical thinking, were encouraged. So I think makes a lot of difference in this regard, and we need that.
Yeah, thank you, Caitlin.
I when I was working on my PhD thesis, I read a book which influenced a lot, and I was lucky enough to have the author be one of my examiners. I'll just send the link in the chat. But the whole point of this book that he wrote was he was interested in this question of, how free are we? How much, agency do we have? Or how much are we determined by like social forces, biological forces, historical forces? And he tried to express that through creative writing. And he did a bunch of experiments where he tried to write stories absent any character agency. To the extent that he was trying to not use like any pronouns that implied originative action from characters. And the thing failed dismally. And he realized that thinking about things isn't even possible unless we have some degree of agency. We don't have a framework for thinking things through without being able to attribute actions to actors. And I think if we look at something like, but at the same time, however, those actors are influenced by social, biological, historical forces. And I think if we look at something like evolution, we can see that the organisms that survive are the organisms that balance stability and flexibility. So there's something which endures, which we could see as the result of compelling outside forces like historical forces, the way we get stuck in systems like capitalism or democracy. But to survive, there has to be a degree of flexibility. In evolution, that looks like mutations. Every so often a copy is made that is a bit off. And it means that we can adapt to new environmental niches as organisms. And I think you see the same thing in our cultures and in our thinking, where we have patterns that get passed down through generations that give our cultures and our timelines a degree of stability. But necessarily there's a bit of mutation. Every so often a copy is made, a thought is had that is a bit off from the pattern. And that's what makes both organisms and cultures sustainable, is that flexibility. But at the same time, it is, like, as Marcus says, an escape route. If nothing changed ever, then we would be over pretty quickly, culturally and literally, biologically.
Yeah, it's a great take. Yeah, I think both of your responses really give us something. I can feel that, yeah, the liberating kind of power of critical thinking with community, Lilia, is very important, and creativity, that we co-create, and that in the systems that we inhabit, they are systems. I think thinking with systems, thinking tools and language, it can be very helpful. So that flexibility in a system is called resilience, the capacity to be resilient in the face of some, let's say, I don't want to use systems language, in the face of some kind of unexpected event, okay? And of course, freedom then needs to be understood, not as a given. And again, we strip these words down to almost meaningless slogans. Freedom, what in a individualistic capitalist society means I can go and buy another car, or I can leave my partner and go and find another woman or man, or whatever it is, you know. And of course, that's not freedom. Freedom is contextual, it's embedded. And because as a species, as individuals, we're part of a species. We're never individuals in a vacuum. And it's not only just that the species, therefore, contextualizes me, it's the species in context, in an ecological system, a cosmic system, that plays out. So for me then, freedom and, you know, this ability to act is always limited, and for that we should be thankful. You know, to be absolutely free would be incredibly random. There would be nothing no structure, because, you know, we have structures. We have biophysical structures. We have, you know, structures that we inhabit. We have social structures, and it's all to sort of tie us down. Because, you know, if we were free, the mind would just be everywhere, and we would be out of control. And we were out of control anyway. If you sit down and, like Nock and I were saying, and try and meditate, your mind. So we have to understand, therefore, that freedom is something we can aspire to. Freedom is something that within socio-political, economic systems we need to pay attention to. But it's always a negotiated space, and that's the whole point, I think, of being human beings, is that we are social animals within an ecology that is alive, in which we need to be always mindful, but also remindful in terms of remembering how we sit within the world. What is our purpose in the world? And that purpose is an inner purpose as well as an outer one. I'm given a certain body. I was born at a certain time. I chose certain career moves to become an educator and so on. So that's part of the purpose. But the other purpose is to be, I think, the kind of best human being I can be. And I think that's a really worthwhile purpose. Whether you end up being, you know, a person who makes a difference at, you know, in some sort of historical sense, where they write books about you years later or not. It's not that. It's more like, you know, have you had good kids? Or if you don't have kids, you know, have you, you know, influenced others to just appreciate life? And for me, Futures is very much about awakening people to the fact that there's so much more. We're nearly all blindfolded at some level. And of course, that's where we don't have the freedom. So and because structures hold us down. So then it's this thing between agency and structure, you know, the old story, nature, nurture, all of that stuff that we've all heard about. But at the same time, there is something else there. And that something else is beyond, that's the unknown Nock that we're talking about. That's the area of ignorance where we, as a species, what are we? As an individual within a species, what are we? Why are we here, really? You know, and that to me is a profoundly spiritual question. You can't escape that. You can be an atheist and still wrestling with that question of why are we here? Why am I here? Because it's got nothing to do with whether you believe in God or not. It's actually a question of existential value. Why am I here? What is my mission in life? So, you know, a guy like Carl Sagan, a great atheist, you know, his whole thing was we are, you know, stardust. You know, we are all recycled stardust, or whatever you call it, star stuff. And to me, that gives us a cosmic context in which we need to understand freedom or lack of freedom. You could have chosen to go and watch, you know, a Star Wars movie today instead of showing up for this little talk where we're having this conversation. You didn't. You made a choice to come here. I could have been off helping my, you know, my mad family set up for the funeral tomorrow, but I'm not. I said, no, I'm out of here. I'm coming over here because I want to do this. All right? So I don't think any of us have answered because there's no answer. We've responded with different perspectives depending on from where we are, Nock. So you can have the last word. What did you hear when, you know, Lily was giving her thing, Caitlin, and then I?
Yeah, I like the theme of agency and power. You know, it just still goes back to how much power or agency we have. And I don't have the answer, you know, I'm still exploring, and I really like this theme of purpose, you know, like why are we here? And that actually is the ultimate question of what determines each and every decisions we have every day. Yeah. And if we don't really aware or mindful of that thing that is behind our head, like the guiding star, then we might be just doing things that have been prescribed to us.
Yeah. Yep. So going back to Lilia's thing, critical thinking, why is this given to us this way? Who benefits? And so on. I think that's part of it. The agency and power. And the thing is, we just keep having these conversations. We should never stop having these conversations because there are no answers. There are healthy responses or unhealthy ones. If you go towards the authoritarian, because that helps you feel stable because life is just too much. Like Antonia Pont says, you know, about the fear that we don't actually even cognitively recognize sits behind. You'll go towards authoritarianism because at least it tells you who you are and how you fit in, and it keeps you existentially safe. But that's not enough. Authoritarian systems break down always because it's never enough. The human spirit, you might say, rebels. And that's a good thing. We'll stop recording, hey? I hope that was entertaining for everybody out there.